Hi, and welcome back to Football Made Simple. We are back with the tactical analysis as football made its long-awaited return, as Dortmund hosted Schalke in the revierderby. Dortmund took home all 3 points with a comfortable 4-0 win, thanks to Haaland, a Guerrero double, and a strike from Thorgan Hazard. Dortmund were clinical, far exceeding their XG, but let's take a look at the tactics that both Favre and Wagner implemented during this match. A quick reminder of the base formations used by both teams. Dortmund started with a 3-4-3 with the personnel looking like this. Schalke responded with a similar formation and their personnel looked like this. As Dortmund dominated possession, we'll start by assessing what they looked to do on the ball. When possible, Dortmund looked to play out from the back through the centre-backs. They would look to split their 3 centre-backs wide to utilise the full width of the pitch, which would in turn allow the wing-backs to advance higher up the pitch. Early on in the game, Schalke were looking to press much higher up the pitch, with their 3 forwards looking to push a man high on each centre-back. And they were also willing to commit their midfield to sit higher on Dortmund's double pivot. The lack of passing options at times for Dortmund centre-backs would mean that the centre-backs were pressured into playing it long, or into the channels, or back to Roman Bürki. At times, Dortmund would try and drop Mahmoud Dahoud into the backline to outnumber Schalke 4 versus 3 in this region, but that would leave them very light in the midfield. So Dortmund countered this in a different way. Both Hakimi and Guerrero are talented going forward and are considerable attacking threats, so they could be pushed even higher to act as faux wingers at times. This meant that Dortmund would rarely have to maintain their high attacking 3 spread out across the pitch, and instead, one of Hazard and Julian Brandt would drop into the midfield, whilst the remaining 2 formed a front 2. This meant that now they had a 3 versus 2 in the midfield, giving the centre-backs more options on who to pass out into. From here, a common ploy would be for the double pivots to shift towards one side of the pitch, which in turn drew Schalke's, as they were looking to press high up. The spare Dortmund man would then look to drop into this space and look to receive the pass from the centre-backs, or the pivots. This movement would also put Schalke's fullback in doubt on whether to stay wide on Hakimi or Guerrero on the other side, as if he stayed wide on the fullback, the man in zone 14 could get on the ball and look to turn and attack. But alternatively, if he tugged into the spare midfielder, the fullback would now be free as an outlet for the build-up play and the attack, and as a result both fullbacks were highly involved in the build-up play. Either way, getting the ball into either of these men would bypass the Schalke midfield. Dortmund could also look to make the side overload more pronounced in the build-up, to get Schalke to shift over to one side, which would then make the switch more effective, as the wide man would have a lot more space to attack. And in fact, this system allowed Dortmund to score several of their goals. For the opening goal, we see Brandt and Hazard interchange position, with Hazard now dropping into the midfield, whilst Guerrero is providing the width on the left. Schalke's pivots move up to press Dortmund's pivots whilst cutting the route into Hazard, but this leaves Brandt free in the right half space. Schalke's pivots were focused on what was ahead of them, so Hazard can ghost in behind them. And because Hakimi has occupied Schalke's wing-back, it's Nastasic who has to move out of position to press. This then gives Hazard the time to pick out the perfect cross to Haaland. After the keeper's error, the second goal again sees Brandt behind Haaland, allowing Guerrero to overlap and subsequently score. The final goal again sees Brandt dropping into the midfield to create. Hazard and Haaland again operate as a front 2, moving between the centre-backs to ensure they occupy the entire back 3, which then frees up Guerrero to dominate the wide region and play the 1-2 for the goal. Later on in the match, Schalke would counter this by now only using 2 up front and protecting their midfield. This only gave Dortmund centre-backs more time to pick out passes, and in addition, by that point in the match, it was too late. So what did Schalke look to do during the match? Schalke also looked to play out at times. And though Dortmund did look to press at times, it was strategic and not pressing through the entire match. At times, the centre forwards remained fairly low, looking to cut off the options into the centre of the pitch. Schalke would often look to split their forwards wide in order to push the Dortmund wingbacks deeper to then free their own wingbacks to advance the play. This could be accentuated with the wide centre-back pushing all the way to the touchline to give the full-back even more room to push higher. But one of the main reasons Schalke struggled on the ball at times was an inability to link the midfield and the attack. Schalke would often leave one pivot deeper and look to push several men high, right alongside their forwards, which would limit the passing options for the remaining pivot. But often, as this meant Dortmund were now touch tight to their man, the Schalke man would drop, and the Dortmund man would follow, leaving a momentary gap in the back line. However, they rarely took advantage of this. Perhaps if they kept an extra man in midfield, they would more efficiently be able to utilize a wall pass to take advantage of the man out of position, which is a maneuver, for example, that Leipzig often used to utilize, as we've discussed in a previous video. All in all, it was a one-sided encounter, which means that Dortmund is still well and truly in the title race. As always, this was just a brief overview, so drop any other tactics you noticed down in the comments below. And how do you see the title race progressing? But that's all for today. Remember, keep it simple.